Warning, this podcast typically features spoilers and strong opinions. Proceed with caution.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Then a Moment. It is the show where two lifelong storytellers talk about stories. I'm Pavi Proczko, audiobook narrator, actor, writer.
I'm Colin Funk, a childhood development expert and a musical theater teaching artist.
And today, we're going to be talking about Legally Blonde. But first, let's talk about our moment of the week.
Let's do it. Oh,
Yeah.
but we want to focus in a little bit this week, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because in the past we've been doing just like regular moments, and I think
Like
we've
a moment in our life.
yeah,
but
and I think we want to kind of
get back to the stories.
shore it up on the stories. So, what's your favorite moment of the week in the stories you've been watching or reading or etc.?
Well, I had a very exciting, last minute opportunity this week. I got to see this show last night called Romeo and Juliet, the Remix. It was a screening of this company called Able, and they work with actors who are neurodiverse. They have different intellectual and developmental disabilities, and they work with them. They're usually a theater company that puts on live shows, but over the pandemic, they had this huge project where they've all filmed from their own homes, the teaching artists and the actors with all these different disabilities. There was like over 70 people in this film. They filmed everyone. They did an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. And
Cool.
I know some people that work with Able, but like another friend was like, I have a ticket to this thing with Able, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've wanted to see a show that they did in a while. Let me go see it. And it was really very cool because there's so many times I was watching it, I'm like, oh man, like I wouldn't have thought about those choices or how moving it would be if an actor with less that wasn't as verbal as another one, or that spoke only in sign language, or lots of, like how that would affect the scene work. But there was this one scene in particular between Juliet and her mother, Lady Capulet, and the actors were like giving me like the actor playing Juliet was like at first this like almost like temper tantrum like teenager, and her mom was just like going at her, like leaning in, and I was like, this is brilliant. And they're like acting their faces off, and this might be one of my favorite times I've ever seen, especially that scene.
Yeah.
I thought it was very cool.
That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
Really cool. Maybe we'll get the link up to Able in our show notes or something. We'll get expect that in the show notes.
Yeah,
you can look up Able. It's got some cool stuff going. That's awesome.
Yeah. What about you?
This past week I was in New York City for
so
the
jealous.
yes for the APA, the Audiobook Publishers Association conference, and the Audi Awards, which was really fun and interesting. Got to see
you
all
just
of them.
got back today. I haven't even really heard about this trip yet.
Yes, I just got back today, and I got to see a few shows. I kind of tacked on some time before and after to be able to see some stuff. So I saw Chicago with Jinx Monsoon, which was so cool. She's fantastic. Leah Michele in Funny Girl, which was incredible, and Josh Groban in Sweeney Todd. I just like saw everything that was interesting.
I'm so jealous. Oh man!
And I think the moment there's like Anna Lee Ashford as Mrs. Lovett in Sweeney Todd. Really interesting because like it's such an iconic role that oh my god, horrifying. I've forgotten her name. Who did it originally? Help me. Help. Bedknobs and broomsticks. Mrs. Potts. Angela Lansbury. Oh my goodness gracious. Angela Lansbury is like so good and she originated the role on Broadway, and she's bonkers, totally bonkers. And
there's Patti LuPone,
and then there's Patti LuPone is also bonkers, and that particular
different
bonkers, and that production is like the second one. The first one was like very like violent, Penny Dreadful. The second production was all took place in and it took place in a sanitarium, like in the insane asylum.
I forgot.
So they're wackadoos anyway.
Yeah.
And then this one was much more like, it was lights heavy, which was interesting. But to have Annalee Ashford, who's also her own kind of brand of
speaking
silly
of
and
Legally
wacky.
Blonde.
Oh yeah, she's in the musical. That's right, she is.
Tying it back in.
She's wonderful, and it's interesting seeing her take on this role that has such these iconic renditions of it and doing something completely different.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's like just the way even she's able to break up specific lines that I'm like, I know for a fact from my musical theater studying and watching it a million times that is one full sentence that Mrs. Lovett's just kind of supposed to say, and she broke it up and like filled the space like and I usually don't love pauses. I'm usually like, don't pause, just say the line. Let's get the show over with. But she was able to like give these new meanings to certain things. And there was this one particular moment when Toby is trying to like protect her, because Toby's like a little boy, and he senses that something is like terribly wrong, and of course like Sweeney and Mrs. Lovett are like killing people and putting them in pies and feeding them to London, as you do. Spoilers. But Toby is, it's unclear even in this production exactly kind of if something is wrong or if he's just kind of drunk all the time or what. Interesting. But Toby is, sometimes it's a child, sometimes it's like an adult that's developmentally slow, but he gets a sense of something is going wrong, and so he's like sings "Nothing's Gonna Harm You," because I'm like, I think something's going on, but I'm not gonna let any harm come to you, Mrs. Lovett. And usually the way versions I've seen is like Mrs. Lovett gets like so nervous that she's been found out. And then like kind of like stuffs him into the cellar and locks the door. And in this one, she got angry. She got like so mad and gets so serious. Like, because usually it's kind of like, what are you even talking about? Nothing's wrong. And here she's like, what are you saying? What are you even talking about? No, there's nothing is going on. And then she has this real moment where you see her decide that Toby has to be taken care of. And she's like, oh my God, I need to actually, like, I'm going to take him downstairs, and it's probably the end. And there's a real struggle there. It was this beautiful moment that the whole show, she's like very funny, very, very silly, wacky Mrs. Lovett. And then in this moment, she's just like, I need to kill him. I need to kill this little boy that I've like adopted.
Very interesting.
Oh, and it was really like very touching. And it's like, she's great. I think she's great. And it really filled that role with so much like gravitas.
Wow.
Just made everything else mean more. It was really, really great.
That's very cool.
Yeah. It was awesome. All right. Shall we get to it?
Let's do it.
Let's do some Legally Blonde. It's time.
Give us a synopsis.
Synopsis. All right. It's my turn because last time you did it. All right.
I know.
So Elle Woods is at a university. I don't remember which one. UCLA. Thank you. And she's a merchandising. Fashion merchandising is the major. And she has this boyfriend, Warner, who, surprise, surprise, she thinks is going to propose to her. And instead he breaks up with her because he's going to go to Harvard and needs someone serious. Mm-hmm. Well, then she has the brilliant idea that she too will go to Harvard Law School to follow him there, and she'll prove that she's worth it. And so she goes, seems to be out of her depth despite having gotten in quite easily. Like she had an easy time doing all of these difficult things. She's like very skilled and talented. Yeah. Because of course you're like at UCLA with like a merchandising, degree. But she ends up learning about herself and making friends and working really hard and succeeding, getting on this very prestigious kind of internship path to defend a fellow Gamma Mu, what is it? Delta Nu. Oh my God. I just watched it, I swear. Delta Nu, sorority sister from several years before, is she's being accused of murdering her husband, and Elle uses her knowledge, casting off all of the cliches about being too blonde and too ditzy.
Well, using some of the cliches.
And even using some of it, and using that expertise to prove the innocence of her client, and succeeds in the end. And becomes head of the class, and eschews Warner, who at the end comes back and says, "Oh, you really are the one for me." And in the meantime, declines to any passes from professors that want to making advances on her. She declines the advances. Yes. She at first has a contentious relationship with Vivian Warner's fiance, but then they become friends, and so it's kind of this coming of age story for Elle.
Yeah, and I mean it's a classic. I mean, it is. We looked it up. It's from 2001.
Oh my gosh!
Crazy. I mean, it like defined some of that early 2000s. It's very, very much in line with those early 2000s films.
Yeah.
And it is, I think it is generally widely loved and celebrated, and rightfully so, because it is an excellent movie.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's been talked about on a lot of review podcasts, but we want to talk about it. I'm sure any of our friends who are listening will be rolling their eyes, because the reason that we wanted to talk about this today is kind of talk about it in contrast with the Legally Blonde musical.
Yes. So, Colin has a chip on his shoulder.
Oh my God. You were waiting with that one.
I was.
Jesus. We'll explain that in
just
a minute. Oh my God, that makes me so mad. Oh my God. But anyone who knows me knows that I love the movie. And I love like 75% of the musical. I think there's potential that the musical would be just as brilliant as this movie. It's taking the same storyline. The music is really
got some bops,
really great. Yeah. Excellent. The choreography, they like did the fashion right. I mean, like they got a lot of things right, and just like a couple key points that they just really got wrong, and I think really, it takes the thing that the movie does well.
Yeah.
The lessons, the things that we're learning about the character, and in turn about society, and it takes those, and I think it undercuts a lot of it in a couple really key moments, and we'll get to those.
Let's talk about.
I want to talk about the movie first.
Yeah, let's talk about the movie. Let's talk about kind of what works here.
Yeah. Oh, and just so you guys know, we in researching for this, we decided that we were going to review our own. I reviewed the musical.
Oh, I see. Yes, right. I was like, where the hell is he going with this? Yes, of course we did. Yes.
Oh my
God.
Yes,
he's talking about the musical specifically, and I'm talking about the movie specifically.
We took a focus, and we wanted to bounce the ideas from our own perspective.
Yes.
Pavi rewatched the musical recently. I rewatched the musical, although we've both.
I watched the movie.
The movie is what
yeah.
I said it wrong, but we have both seen both of them.
I haven't seen the musical.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Well, that
blew that out of the water.
Oh my God.
I've seen a lot of it. seen most
my
of it.
gosh.
I know a lot of the music. We do it in the classes. Okay. Anyway, cut that. We can cut it. We can cut that, right? I didn't watch the musical. I know most of it.
No, they should know.
Yes, they should know.
Okay,
so we journalists. Okay,
the movie.
What works?
Tell me what works.
Okay, so there's so much that works. The expectations. So setting up these expectations and then breaking them, making these judgments on people. So we see Elle Woods right at the beginning, and we see the decor and where she is, and we get a hint of what her parents are like, and that she's this kind of person, and that we have this expectation of who she is.
Which is what? What is that expectation?
She's like a ditzy blonde that is not very smart.
Yeah.
Like she's obviously an idiot, right?
Yeah.
That's really like what they're trying to just drive home. But even in
That's
doing
what it feels
that,
like, right.
It really does. But even in doing that, one of the first scenes, she's like, someone at the store tries to like sell her this dress.
Oh my gosh.
And like
Again,
takes the thing. It's like, oh
moment.
my God, someone with daddy's credit card, I can just like take the sale dress off, the sale tag off, and bring it and be like, oh, we just got this one in. And Elle just right away is like, oh, well, I caught you in your lie because I know that that's not, and I know a lot about this stuff.
I just think that's so brilliant that they do it that way because it does both at the same time. It still sets her up to be this like, I know clothes.
Yeah.
I know dresses. Like, I know this is from last year. It's like she's smart.
Yeah.
But like, it does give you permission to still not take her that seriously.
That's right. And I think that's an interesting, now that you say that, that's an interesting point about just like how we feel about certain kinds of knowledge.
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
and not even just, she's obviously has like very academic intelligence. She remembers facts. She knows how stuff works. She obviously tests well.
I mean, they set up early on that she has a 4.0.
She has a 4.0
average at UCLA.
At UCLA.
That's not a nothing school.
For a business degree.
It's a business degree.
So she's very academic. She's very good at studying and all of that. And yet, because of the kind, like the domain that she studies, we are inclined not to take her seriously.
Yeah.
We're inclined to just shrug it off. And I think that I love that kind of like pokes, by the end especially, kind of like, it just pokes a hole in that and makes you kind of rethink what other domains am I not taking seriously? Well,
Absolutely.
They know a whole lot about, how many times in our lives is like, well, they know a lot about like musical theater and like how to act and sing and do all that stuff.
Yeah, any like nerd culture, anything that's like very girly. I think we've kind of moved beyond that. Now in the world of like TikTok and YouTube, everyone with some sort of expertise kind of like has a place.
Right.
But I
mean,
think
especially
around
back
that
then.
time,
Oh my God, 2001. Yeah.
people didn't take fashion knowledge seriously.
Right. So I think that really works very well, kind of that undermining our expectations.
They set the expectations.
And I also think my favorite element of the whole film is how much she drives all of it, which I think we'll probably get to because I think that's something in the musical that doesn't work as well. But I think she is the reason, like she decides to go. There's this moment where she is in her, Vivian, the evil fiance that ends up not being evil. Again, another expectation broken, right?
Yeah.
Sidebar, I'll put a pin in that because there's this wonderful moment there too. But there's between them, like the conflict between them is interesting. But Vivian tells her to come to a party. It's a costume party, so come. And she comes in this like cliche, that cliche like bunny rabbit, the Playboy bunny, and no one is in costume because Vivian has lied to her to make her feel terrible.
Yeah,
to really humiliate
her. Yeah.
So she comes and she tries to, it's also the moment where she realizes that Warner's not going to come back to her. Warner does not take her seriously. It's like the real kind of nail in the coffin. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
great.
actually. I'm never gonna be good enough. Actually,
Oof. That I just love them. It's like
I
one
know.
of my, it gets
and then
me every time.
when I know, and it's
and speaking
seeing
of that,
it.
like Reese Witherspoon,
She's
if anyone has underestimated her acting in that is actually brilliant.
yeah, and it was. I mean, it's the harbinger of things to come. Like she's so good,
yeah.
you know.
I mean,
and it
we
was
know
then
now,
too.
We know now that
Of
like
course.
she's gotten lots of accolades and
Right.
and things.
But the proof was already there. Like we
she
already
was
saw
excellent
it.
then.
Yeah, and
Again, something that's not taken seriously. We look at
yeah,
acting performances
just
in a
Reese
movie that's
Witherspoon.
like fluffy and,
Right.
and fun and comedic. We're not taking the actual acting that's happening seriously.
and it's really good.
While Reese Witherspoon is actually brilliant.
Mm-hmm. And there's that moment where now she's like walking out of the party and she says, I will show you how valuable Elle Woods can be. And she's like storming out the thing. And it's like, she just needed, and she's like, I'm going to prove it to you. I could do this. She got a 179 on her LSAT. She got, you know.
Remember that number.
Remember that, 179. 179 on the LSAT. She,
I promise it's relevant.
she's like just studied for it over like a month and like got it, you know. It's like she did a very strange but awesome video essay that like got her in. She's obviously good at all of this.
Yeah.
And she does the work.
She's smart. She thinks out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
She is a unique voice. There's a lot of things that, especially now, we see as like very valuable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
and that I think that's so strong that it's so strong that she's the one that goes in and decides to do everything. And when she's given the opportunity to find out the alibi of her client, and
I mean,
she learns it. She knows that her client didn't do it, but she can't give the alibi up. And she's like, "No, I can't tell you. I've made a promise."
There's proof.
There's
an alibi.
Yeah.
That the client that she's trying to get off was getting plastic surgery as a fitness
a
would
fitness
say
guru,
influencer.
an
But
influencer, but yeah, she's a guru, and so she can't be seen. It would be damaging.
She would rather get sentenced than lose her whole career if this alibi came out when there's proof that she was
because there are receipts, in fact.
Yeah.
So, but she's like, you know what? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this in a way that is actually going to honor my promise to her reputation, because I know that's important to her, and only Elle knows because everybody else in the room, all these other lawyers, are outside of that world.
That moment where she's in the room while they were like, oh, did you get that alibi? She's like, oh yeah. And it's a really good one.
Oh
like,
yeah, and it's a really good one.
It's like
it's
such a great moment.
so
They're like,
funny.
oh my God, everyone's so excited.
Yes,
And
they're
she's
like,
oh, I can't tell you.
Oh, I can't tell you.
You're like,
what do you mean you can't?
It's so good.
It's really fantastic. Oh yeah, I did. It's like, so why'd you go see her? Like, they're so mad. They're gonna like punish her. So why? Oh yeah, you went to go see her? Yeah, I went to get the alibi. Okay. Yeah, I got it. It's a good one. It's so good. It's so funny. And and then she, again, as I said, she like rejects the professor who tries to like make a move on her, because he, again, with the expectations being very low about her abilities, he brings her on just because she's pretty.
Well, and talk about setting expectations. Like in the movie, it's set up that he is kind of like this cold, neutral.
Yeah, he's kind of almost
fact-driven.
Yeah.
Not really. We don't see. There's no like ethical judgment about this person,
and it's in opposition to the first professor that we see, which is the one that's like kind of cruel to her. The woman professor,
which is another
really
like trope, very interesting
setup, expectations. And so it's like, oh, she gets kicked out of class for not having done the reading or not knowing an answer or something, and then we see the other professor, the one played by Victor Garber, and he's actually very supportive of her. Like he ends up being kind of like he's the secret villain in the end.
Right. Which I think is very
secret
very
villain, secret ally, because we see the other the other professor come in later, be like, "What, you're gonna ruin? Let one asshole ruin your life?
Yeah,
come on."
Again, they set up expectations to be
broken,
kind of all over the place.
Yes, all over the place.
Yeah,
it's really good,
and I think it does it really well. That like you watch the movie and there's so many little surprises and little things along the way.
Yeah,
and it's so simple the way they're doing it, storytelling wise.
Mm-hmm.
They're just setting up an expectation, something that anyone would expect based on what society thinks.
Yeah.
They just set it up and then just show you what's really happening. And it's really, it's so subtle, and I think they're really well done.
It's interesting that you say that, because it just made me think of Power of the Dog. Maybe we should do an episode about that, because it kind of does a similar thing where it's like you think this is one kind of movie and it's not.
I mean, yes,
it's a different thing. I mean, that one Power of the Dog is like very, very crazy.
I'm like, oh, I think it's this. Oh, I think it's this. And at the end, I'm like, what just happened?
Yeah. But Legally Blonde is a little bit, we'll talk about that another time, but Legally Blonde is a little bit less enigmatic.
Yes, sure.
But when we are given all these expectations and they're all broken, we think that she's gonna, this is part, we'll talk about this in a minute, but we think that she's gonna, Luke Wilson's in it, and we think they're gonna have a romance.
Yeah. We
don't see one. Put a pin in that, sidebar. We'll footnote that. But then we think that we're going to have just like, she hates Vivian and they're going to be like mean about it. But there's this really interesting human moment where they're like, she's talking with Jennifer Coolidge, Dame Jennifer Coolidge,
so glad that
Saint Jennifer Coolidge.
She's having her little
she's having her little renaissance here. And it's like she thanked Reese for her little, that was kind of the beginning of her career there.
Yeah. I mean, she was also, speaking of brilliant performances,
very
Jennifer
good.
Coolidge. Excellent.
Very funny.
Very good.
But she's, talking to her about Vivian. She's like, well, is she pretty? Like, does she look as good as you? And Ella's like, well, she could use a little more like eyeliner. She could probably like color a little differently, but yeah, she's not totally hopeless. She thinks she's pretty, and she's willing to make that concession.
I'm so glad you brought up that moment, because like there is a parallel moment, and I will talk about what they do in the musical.
Okay, interesting.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I loved that moment. That like it wasn't just like, and she's like a dog.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
Especially because there's a moment earlier and where she has a moment with one of the extras talking about Warner's brother's fiance.
Yeah.
And it kind of parallels that. And we'll talk about that in a minute too, I think. So I want to save that for our superlatives. But I love that moment. And there's like it's a broken expectation there. And it's broken so subtly, as you say, that it's like we don't need it to be total departure. We're still in the same story, but we're seeing just, I thought we were just ragging on them.
Right.
But we're not just ragging on them. We actually get to see a little glimmer of that potential humanity.
Exactly. I mean, it really feels human, because in that moment, nobody's upset because their ex is dating someone hideous. Right. People are upset when their ex is dating someone that is
kind of pretty.
Yeah. That is, I think, is a big insecurity that people have. You don't want your ex to run to someone who's more attractive than you, than it just, ticks off all those boxes of like, it's all of my insecurities.
That person
is showing me all the things that are wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I think it shows in that moment. And I think that is really beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think those are mostly the things that work there. I mean,
there's lists.
There's so much that works. So much that
moments
works.
There's so many brilliant moments in that movie. But before we get to the musical, I would love to hear what you think didn't work.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I haven't rewatched as recently as you have, and honestly, I'm racking my brain to think of something that I don't think works in the movie. So please educate.
There were two things that stuck out to me. One of them is the very, very end. And this is my footnote.
Okay.
About the Luke Wilson character, Evan or Ethan or I don't even remember his name. He was like relatively unimportant, but he's just an ally. He's a friend through the whole show, the whole movie. He's a friend, and then we just have this epilogue.
His name's Emmett.
Yes,
oh my
thank
gosh,
you,
That
Emmett.
was driving me crazy.
The epilogue at the end, where she like wins the trial and she walks out the door into the light, and then we're 2 years later and she's graduating and gets this whole thing, and we gets to do the speech, and we get to see Warner be mad, we get to see Vivian be her friend, we get to see the little very 90s early 2000s, the text of like, what are they doing now, very That Thing You Do, yeah, and
That music.
there's like the first song and the last song was like the same song.
the same? Okay.
I think it's the
I
same
was like, 'cause
song.
that's the opening song.
Yeah, the opening song and the ending song are the same. It's like you can't stop me, or I don't remember. It's like that's that one.
Yeah.
Yes, but I don't love the epilogue. I don't think they needed it.
Sure. Okay.
It could have just been
That's
cut, and I like kind of that implication of Emmett maybe being interested. It's there. It's like she obviously has a friend, but like I know she's gonna be fine. I don't need to know that Warner didn't. It was unnecessary, and I love just that last moment of her like walking through that door into the light, and it's all lovely, and we have the end of the movie, and I just think that would have been much stronger.
I do like we did it.
Yeah.
I do like her speech at the end. I don't think
it is lovely. The speech is very nice. It kind of
I can see what you're saying.
It
though,
ties it.
storytelling-wise.
It's a bookend.
But I don't need You don't need all those little like.
I didn't need all that.
Especially, and they ended up having at least 1 or 2 sequels.
Yes, there's one that's Legally Blonde. Yeah,
was one of them. Was
Legally Blonde 2
Yeah, that was
is
Red, White,
that
Blonde,
one,
yeah.
and then there's Legally Blondes.
Is there? I don't know.
Yes, that was 2009.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that one,
I
except that
have
there's 2 of
seen
them.
Red, White,
They're
and Blonde.
multiplying.
I don't know what that means, but okay, so the epilogue didn't work.
The epilogue didn't work. They also do like that very cliche 90s thing where they like freeze frame the last moment.
Okay.
That's
like
it's very tropey of the time. It's of the era.
Right.
And I know people might be mad. There's that it's like, oh, and he's going to propose tonight. Like Emmett proposes tonight, because it's like a little bookend. It's a full circle moment. So I understand why. I just don't think it's necessary.
Yeah. I'm sure it's for the like, okay, this story isn't about that, but you guys did pick up on the fact that they were were connecting. And I think that's the one thing I like, that they're like, oh, we're just giving a little.
She does get her man in the end.
They like build a relationship out of support,
yes.
and it doesn't need to be that much more for it to be like the beginning of something. And I do like that, but I see why they don't need to like spell it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one. And the second thing is, I think the entire bend and snap sequence
I'm not gonna hear this. I'm not gonna agree.
I think the whole bend and snap sequence is so awkward,
amazing,
and nobody does that. Nobody bends and snaps, and it's like all.
You don't know. You don't know what little tricks.
What it feels like they reverse engineered. They're like, well, we need Jennifer Coolidge to break this guy's nose. So how is she going to do? She's just going to like be trying to impress him and like lift up her head really, really fast. But we need to like figure out how we get her to be doing that. And she's taking advice. That is like this weird. I mean, it's like, to be fair, I guess, it's like built for a number. It's built for a musical number.
Yeah, truly. I mean, I think that sequence.
They
is
even
one
do
of the
like
reasons
dancing
why
there,
they
and like,
decided to make it a
and then like
musical,
that
for
that
sure.
gay man comes in and he's like, "Yo, dude, the bend and snap works every time." He was just on, that drag queen wasn't in drag for the movie, but she was just on RuPaul.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she was the guest with Lux Noir London. that was interviewing in the golf cart. I don't know if anybody's watching RuPaul's Drag Race.
That's right.
Lux Noir London.
We just saw her in
is driving a little golf cart, and I don't remember what her name is, but that's the same person as that person. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. I do remember. Yep.
But it's just like the bend and snap. Like, what the hell is that? No one's ever done that before, and no one's done it since.
I will disagree. But no, I'm just going to disagree. I think while it is like a moment that is camp, and it is not really like, there are like small, like it's watered down camp the rest of the movie, but like it is stylized a bit. Like a la Clueless and those like 90s. Like there is a stylization to the way they're telling the story. And I think the bend and snap is like kind of the crux of that. It's the big moment. And I think it's a way to make bigger these, it feels like an updated version of like a move you would do in the Victorian ages, where you're like, oh, you have to drop your handkerchief.
Oh, it's like the fan dance.
It's like
the restoration fans, where they're like, there's like, the language of fans, where it's like, this means I want you to come to me. This means I want you to leave me alone. Yeah.
It's like this thing that like, and I think everyone still has their like, oh, when I'm in a bar, like what I do, my move is I flip my hair and kind of like look, wicked toss. Yeah. Like there is like something to this, like people do have their like little isms that they like bring to those moments to like show off. And I think the thing about that moment is it's like it really one of Elle's really strong intelligences is her social intelligence.
Yeah.
And the way she interacts with people, even though it like feels like that's not the case when she gets to Harvard, because everyone is like very anti Elle. So they're like very put off by the way that she interacts with people. But she has this way of using her body and her charm to get the things and to affect the world around her. That's just like part of her skill set that she's bringing to the table. And they do push it to kind of the extreme in that moment, and they make it kind of ridiculous and campy, but I think there's value in it. And
I think that's helpful to think of it that way too, as like as some way that it ties together the camp of the rest of it, because it is. I mean, there's so much camp in it. There is, and it is the high peak point. Yeah, I think that's helpful framing. It
is like it feels like it lets you go to this like it's like the farthest you can go in this like silly moment. Yeah, it's like one of those moments where you're like, this got crazy, and everyone just started like dancing around me. Like those like real life moments where you're like,
yeah, for sure.
Did that really just happen? That's kind of how I see it, and it doesn't bother me because I think it's cute. But I do see why someone would think that didn't work.
Yeah.
Speaking of not working.
Oh, yes. Let's go on to the...
So I'll start...
What works in the musical?
Yeah, I'll start there because I don't want to totally badmouth the musical.
Sure.
I love the music.
The music is so good.
I think about the first 15, 20 minutes is like really flawless. It is like they like the style and the tone of it right off the bat. They get this like really... They start really campy and really, they do the same thing. They set up this expectation where these like ditzy girls and they start, this opening song is called Oh My God, You Guys. And like,
oh my God, you guys.
It sets it up that you don't take this group of people seriously.
Right.
I think that's brilliant. And the music it really feels in line with the music that was in the movie and the time period, where it's like very upbeat, very poppy, very light bubblegummy.
Well, you work out to some of it.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Because they're like 8-minute long songs, sequences that are like just like really great.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's really fun music, and it's a fun show, and it sets it up to be this kind of like light, fluffy thing. And I think that's really brilliant. And they do a couple things. So they do a couple adjustments from the movie. one of the moments that you brought up that I think actually works very well in the musical too, and I think it works, they use it being a musical to make it work really well, is that same moment at the party where she's talking to Warner and he rejects her for that second time.
Yeah.
I think I'm so glad that they did that in the musical and made it a feature. And the way they did it in the musical is the first time that he breaks up with her, this like proposal moment. It's a big moment where she thinks he's going to propose, and it's a song called Serious, and he's talking about, oh, I need to be serious, and she's like all excited, and he's like, the way they write it, I think it's so
very
cute.
Funny.
And
we should break up.
They like set it up that he's gonna sing, I think we should get married.
Right.
I think, and he totally flips the switch and says and it feels surprising to us and to Elle, and very cute song. Now, fast forward to this moment at the party, like they do a reprise of that song, and I think it was the first time I remember in musical theater that I was like watching a show and being like, oh, that's why they do reprises of songs, to like take this, to like remind us of this other moment and to
build on it,
to change what we see and to change what's happening, and to be like, oh, I was feeling that then and now I'm feeling this then, because they bring it back and the same thing happens to her again.
Yeah.
Where she's like, oh, I'm serious now. Now he's going to finally take me seriously. They bring it back, and I think it's like really smart. And then he goes, what are you talking about? Like, no one's going to take you seriously. And I think it's like it makes it just as heartbreaking as the movie does.
That's actually like, rock bottom right there.
Yeah, I think the musical actually takes that moment and is really brilliant.
Yeah.
Also, the dance numbers just generally are incredible.
They really are.
One thing. Oh, so yeah, a couple of things they change from the movie. The video essay is like a live like performance essay, which is like so stupid, but like it doesn't like make sense in reality. But this is a musical, so they're translating it to stage. So of course they're like they make this big production number.
Right.
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I do. Like it's
That's
stupid.
the adaptation, right? It's like
it's an adaptation, and I think like that speaks to using the medium that you're working in and using it to your advantage. Changing a video essay to a live performance essay, great choice.
Right.
And I think they do it well, except for one minor thing that I'll talk about in a sec. But the one other change that I really appreciate is that at the end, both Warner and Vivian see Callahan hit on Elle, and in the musical. In the movie, Vivian sees her and she's like, she's like, oh, gross, you're awful. And she's just misunderstood what's happened. And she misunderstands, which I think is
an interesting,
very interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Yeah.
But in the musical, what happens is they both see her, and Warner's the one to be like, I guess you slept your way into the position, essentially. And you see Vivian have this moment, and she's like, shut up, Warner. And then she like gets all flustered and like walks away, and you think, oh, she's disgusted by Elle too.
Yeah.
But then she comes back. She does the whole like she's in the she's like the lady professor who comes around and is like, that's not what I see.
Yeah.
She becomes
she
that
takes
role
that
because
role.
that lady professor isn't in.
Got it.
Isn't in the musical. Both professors are kind of the Victor Garber professor character, and the lady professor is also like. Vivian kind of takes that too.
Got it.
So it gives her a little bit of agency, because at the end, it lets her be like, no, I didn't see that Warner saw. Warner might have seen that, but that's not what I saw when I was watching. You can tell like the distraught and it's really interesting that she just like witnessed someone else get harassed, and she has this emotional reaction, comes back and is like, no, that was BS.
Yeah,
like,
even though ostensibly they're villains, she actually gets that she ends up finding that empathy with her.
Yes, that she actually sees it happen, and she's able to decode the situation.
Yeah,
and I think that is an interesting choice, and I do appreciate that, because then it's the Legally Blonde reprise again.
Yeah, well,
and
which is also like sick.
That reprise also is a great reprise.
It's such a good reprise.
Because Legally Blonde the song is her being like, I guess I'll always be legally blonde. I'm so sad. And then the Legally Blonde reprise
They're
is
like,
like
"You're
Vivian being
legally
like,
blonde,
you're legally blonde. Be
woo!"
proud of it. And I think that's like really, really great.
Yeah.
Now.
Shall we? It's exhausting.
Again, if
For those
you're
of
one
us
my friends, you
listening,
could,
he is just deflated.
But yes, so I think the musical, what it just undercuts Elle's, what you talk about. Elle is driving the movie. She drives every single moment in that movie. We see some really great relationships and like conflicts between her and the other women in the thing with like real nuance and real humanity.
Yeah.
And it is just like, there's so many like little things sprinkled throughout the musical that really undercut it.
Yeah.
And some of them being like really small, like changing 179 in the movie
For the LSAT score,
her score is 179, and in the musical it is 175. Why? I don't know.
Yeah,
Not
they made
sure.
it. It's like that's what she needed to get. That was the minimum.
She just
you need to
barely
get
scraped
a
by.
175, and then she just
It was in a
scrapes by.
song, and people were like, well, maybe it's the rhyme. I'm like,
It
first of all,
does-
5 doesn't rhyme with whatever the word was.
No, it's not a
And
rhyme.
but it's the same I vowel, so you could have gotten away with 179 just as well as 175. So that's stupid.
Yeah.
And then like the end of the essay, the thing, like in the movie, they're essentially looking at it and they're like, she's qualified and she's very different than anyone else we have.
Yeah.
There's not actually a reason for us not to admit her.
Right.
Because she actually hits all the boxes.
Yeah.
In the musical, the one guy's like, no, we're not gonna like, you guys just want to put her in because she's blonde and she's pretty. Like, we shouldn't admit her. And at the end of her video essay, she's like, or the performance essay, whatever, she's like, but what about love? Haven't you ever been in love? She uses love to convince him, which like I know is like an internal motivation for her.
Sure.
But it is not what's driving the action.
No.
It's like driving her actions.
Right.
But it like,
It's her why. It's not what she's doing.
right. Which is, I think it undercuts that she is just actually qualified.
Right.
It's not just like an emotional appeal.
Yeah.
It's that she's qualified and she's unique, and so she got in.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they needed
That's
to
a weird
change that.
undercut. Right.
Something that the movie did well, you talked about it, they really set up this complicated relationship between Vivian and Elle
Yeah.
that we see even at the beginning, that moment at the salon where she's like, but she's not
ugly.
She's not ugly. In the musical, they have that moment, and she just rags on her. She's like, and she has this wrong, and this wrong, and this wrong. And I was like, oh, that's kind of disappointing. That she does not. I'm not seeing that like humanity where she's like, but there's nothing wrong with her.
Right. Yeah.
I wish for that, and they like have so many beautiful little moments along the way where Vivian is like seeing Warner through Elle's eyes, like seeing the ethical things that Elle is doing, and really they're forming a bond. They form a bond throughout the movie.
Yeah.
And they don't really do that in the musical. They just like give
Just
that
until
really,
that last
in
moment
That
with-
moment.
yeah.
They don't really have any moments before of them kind of.
Oh yeah, because they do in the
Getting
movie.
along.
There's like she needs help with some work. She's like, oh, did you finish? Because they're just working on this project together. For
Callahan
that.
gave me all this.
Yeah,
extra
Callum gave me
work.
all this extra work, and it's like, oh well, I just so you know, I think you really did the right thing. I think that's really very classy that you didn't. It's like she reaches out.
Yeah, I think it's like really
And it's really nice.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And they do that. Okay, but the number one sin that I think this musical does is with the song "Chip on My Shoulder," which you alluded to earlier.
I did. Colin has a chip on his shoulder. We can roll it back.
Oh my God. You're so rude. There's a song called "Chip on My Shoulder." Now, this beautiful moment that we talk about, that Pavi talked about earlier, where Elle goes, let me show you just how valuable Elle Woods is.
Yep.
She storms off. She goes straight to buy a laptop.
Yeah, in her costume. She's still a Playboy bunny. She goes to the Apple store. Were they around then? I don't even remember.
Who knows?
But whenever she went, she's like, I'm going to buy my little MacBook.
Doesn't say a word. Luke Wilson, Emmett's in line behind her. And he's looking at her. And because she's wearing the costume, she just says, don't ask or don't say anything or whatever. And he says, I wasn't gonna. So that is the extent of what Emmett does in the movie in that moment.
And I love that.
From that
it's
moment
so good.
on, there's just a montage of
her
Elle
succeeding. She's doing work
together and doing her work. Studying because obviously she knows how.
Yeah.
She's got a 4.0 grade point average. In the musical, the song Chip on My Shoulder, Emmett finds Elle crying on a bench after this party. And she's like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, oh, boo-hoo, poor little rich girl. You got to study, duh. And sings a song about like how he came from nothing and had to work his whole life. And you just need to like find that thing that motivates you because love doesn't count.
Right.
And otherwise you don't know how to study. There's like, oh, it's so long too. And it keeps like moving location. Like they go to her room and he's like making fun of it being all pink and that she has Red Bull and she's like, where are your books? Where, like, why don't you know, like, you do know how to study, don't you? And I'm like, are you kidding me? She was doing school. She just wasn't paying that close attention before because she didn't care before.
Right.
And now she did. So she, like, in the movie, she's just like, well, now I care. So now I'm going to do it.
Right.
And in the musical, it's just him being like, let me hold your hand, little girl, and remind you how to do school. And I hate it. It makes me so mad.
Yeah. That just undercuts the strongest element
I think
of the film. That undercuts the whole thing.
It undercuts the whole thing. And then they have this like song after where Elle's like, let me thank you by buying you a suit to give you all the confidence you need. Being like, my only value is to buy clothes and to have money. And I'm like, that's not what it is.
That's so disappointing because it's like the way it was already was good. You didn't have to change
I don't
any
know
of
why.
it.
I don't know why they made those choices because, I watched, there was also, if you don't know, there was a reality competition called The Search for the Next Elle Woods, something like that.
Yeah.
Where it was a reality show because if you didn't know, the whole musical was played on MTV. It is still available on YouTube to watch in its entirety, maybe on MTV.com. I'm not sure. But you can watch the whole musical. And because it was so popular, they did this show called The Search to Find the Next Elle Woods, where it was a reality competition where these actors competed to play Elle Woods next on Broadway.
Oh, it makes me want to vomit.
And it was, honestly, that's a trip all in and of itself. It is kind of like pinnacle of that like trashy reality. Oh, it's
and
so
for like
just
this
like pushing
job
the
too.
drama.
It's just like knowing what it's like to like audition for stuff and just like making it a competition like that.
It's like hard to watch, but in like all that like terrible reality TV way.
Yeah.
But no, I don't even remember why I was talking about it.
I'm so sorry.
Oh my gosh.
You were talking about the reality TV show.
You're so helpful. Oh my gosh. In the reality TV show, well, I lost it.
Yeah.
What were we talking about?
We were talking about Emmett and the song that she sings for him about the suit and the only worth that she has is her.
After that, we were. So you start talking about.
What did I start talking about? Oh, the story was already good. Like you didn't have to change it.
Oh yes. Oh, so they in the show. One of the judges, one of the hosts, is one of the writers, one of the book writers.
Right.
And they talk so many times throughout the show about how empowering it is and how they really double down on the feminism and the girl power. And I was like, I just like could not watch it with a straight face. I'm like, are you kidding me? Every time they said it, I was like, "You
made it
you're
worse.
Wrong. You're just wrong."
I mean, it reminds me. I don't want to get too much into it, but it's like the Moulin Rouge and the Moulin Rouge musical, where it's like they keep doing this, where it's like the adaptation, it wasn't good. I didn't like it. We can talk about it another time. But the things that they changed, the movie was already good.
Yes, it was.
And these really important moments, they just change who's making decisions, what kind of people the characters are. They're making them different archetypes, really key things
really
that make it work.
The storytelling.
Yeah, that makes it suddenly undeserved, makes it unearned completely.
And I think, like, especially when you go to musical theater, they sometimes forget about storytelling in efforts to make sure there's enough songs and that there's enough numbers and
enough songs and
stuff.
the it's like looking at a graph where it's like we need the highs and the lows and we need a dance number here, we need a ballad here, and it doesn't even matter how we got there.
We need the nothing number, the back from act
back from act 1 from the intermission where there's like if you're late,
silly goofy song.
If you're late coming back with your drink, it doesn't matter because you didn't get any more story here.
And you can write a story within that format, but it definitely, I see, like, it undercuts it. And just like that, like, chip on my shoulder, like, it was so powerful in the movie that she had this montage. There was no words. It's music, and she just, like, we saw her studying and going for it. And
making friends and doing work. Hard work.
It doesn't need to be a full song.
No.
I would love more musicals to say, that moment doesn't need to be a song.
Yeah.
That can be a silent moment where we just see her do stuff. Or it can be, you can underscore it. Sure.
Maybe it's a little ballet.
Maybe it's
Maybe it's a dance
Maybe it's
number.
A dream ballet.
Or it's like dance movement. It's like ography. It's like it's stageography, you know?
That can be done well. That is tricky. But
it's like the Notebook musical where it's like the dancing wasn't like ballet. It was very modern, but it was very heavily choreographed and poignant, right?
Yes.
Not all of it, obviously. We'll talk about that another time too. But there's like some dance moments like that where it was like if it could be movement to music.
Yeah. But in general, because of that, it's really hard for me to it really takes it down a couple notches from the movie. Even with, like, the story generally being intact and the tone being right and the songs being so good and the dances being so good. There's so much going for it.
Yeah.
And, like, it's hard for me to watch. It was hard for me to rewatch. There's I can listen to the songs that I know and I love, and I can kind of focus on those things. But as a whole thing, it is rough for me.
Yeah.
Because the movie is
so good.
So good.
The movie is so good. And it's short. It's it's an hour and a half. Yeah. It's great. It's great.
Well, let's do some
superlatives.
Superlatives.
Let's get to the superlatives. Dun, 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 dun.
Bum.
Maybe someday we'll have some theme music there.
Yeah. Well, and since you looked at the movie and I did the musical, do you want to do? Let's start with. Well, let's do both of them at the same time. But
sure. Okay, my Oscar moment.
Start with Oscar moment.
Oscar moment. There's actually. There's a lot. I mean, Reese is fantastic. Runner up. I definitely give that. Like, I'll show you how valuable.
Brilliant.
Elle Woods can be. I actually find the what's her name? Chutney, the daughter.
Oh, yes. Oh, that actress is great too.
That actress.
I can't remember her name.
I can't remember her name either.
She is brilliant. She's gone on to do
lots of things
too.
But when she's caught in her lie,
she's so good.
In that court scene, like the rest of it, she's just kind of like a very big attitude, kind of like in her low 20s girl, just being a jerk. And then she's caught in her lie, and she starts like tearing up and she loses her cool. It's so impressive.
Oh,
that I was like, oh wow, you're acting this role right here. This is crazy. I always found that. I remember that striking me even the first time I watched it back in 2001.
Sure.
Being like, wow, she's like really in it. She's very good, and to have so little to work off of is very good. I think that's my Oscar moment. It goes to her.
I agree.
Yeah.
Like that is like vivid in my memory too. Like she was so good.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna. I don't know. I think I want to give it to just the moment in that first serious in the proposal. I think the way that they play off of each other and the way that she builds her up, oh my gosh, what's her name?
Oh God, I don't remember her name.
Oh, it's
Yeah. It's like 3 words. It's 3 names.
Yes.
Is that 3-name person?
Gosh, this is terrible.
I don't remember. Oh shoot. We'll have to look. Cut out this big pause. We're going to remember her name.
What is her name? Laura Bell Bundy.
Laura Bell Bundy.
Yeah. So Laura Bell Bundy in that scene with during that proposal, she's so excited and they're playing back and forth. Like she built herself so high up. Her energy is really high up. And when he's like, we should break up, she goes right into like this, like, she's excited. She's like, yes, baby, I'll get, like, she's like, yes, I'll accept your proposal. And then she just like, you see the like realization halfway through the line and just like totally breaks. Yes, give me my hand. Like, what? Like she just like explodes in the middle, and the way that scene is designed is so effective and so like it feels very campy and silly, but like it gets me. I think it's so well done, and it's like that's tricky. Those comedic back and forth, those like. That timing and the pacing. It's
actually very hard, and it very
really
rarely
difficult.
Actually gets the recognition that it should. You know, I think more so on stage than it would in actual Oscars. Like in film, it's so hard. It's like a comedic role to get anything.
It does. It definitely does more in theater.
Yeah.
But like even watching, because they did that pretty early on, I think in the series, in the competition series, where they made them do that scene, and to watch, like it's hard. It's hard to like find that moment and do it in a way that's like really effective. And I think she just like nails it, and just is like very campy and sad, like similar to how. Similar but different to how Reese Witherspoon is doing it in the movie, where it's like this like big over the top like crying and sobbing. That this character is just like she's just over the top.
Yeah, it
just makes sense that she's like sob crying in the middle of this restaurant.
Yeah,
so I think that
absolutely
is my Oscar moment.
Wow, I do want to. I think I want to add one more thing.
Do it.
To the Oscar moment, just to remind us that we don't always have to give it to actors.
Yeah,
I think.
didn't last time.
And I don't remember what we said last time.
Breaking Bad, I gave it to
the costumes,
the design,
the design. I think I was going to say the costumes for the movie.
Honestly, the
fantastic.
Costumes for the musical, they really do it justice.
Yeah,
like
the costuming
we've been seeing
is
a lot
great.
of like fashion shows become musicals.
Yeah,
Devil Wears Prada, where the fashion isn't done well,
not good. Yeah,
and so you lose that part of the story, and it's part of the storytelling, and they use it to tell a story in the movie, and they like get the fashion right to like how fashionable it is, but like to the time period too.
Right.
They do it really well in the musical.
Yeah.
But
cool. Great. Costumes.
Another
award. All right.
Telling the story. They're excellent.
Yes. Okay.
So an unearned.
The unearned award. I think there's a weird moment with the lesbian.
Enid.
That's a little bit unearned, I think.
Okay.
It's a little strange. I think that it's like, it does like follow the expectation and expectation breaking, but she's, Elle is like trying to get into the study group and then like walks past another, like she's rejected and she leaves and she's walking past another study group with Enid.
Yeah.
And she's like, she says something like really cruel to her. Mm-hmm. And Elle's like, no, I wouldn't ever do anything. Like I would be nice to you if you came to try to like be in my study group. She's like, yeah. And then right after, I turned my back, you'd call me a dyke and blah, 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 blah. She's like, I don't use that word. Why would you even expect me to do that? And it was just a weird moment that it highlights this character that I'm like, apparently that character has more of a role in the musical.
Yeah.
But it just, in the movie, I was just like, I don't even remember, I was like, why are we giving this person so much airtime? And she's like kind of forgotten about after that.
I mean, I think it's like the foil. It's like this, like, what does feminism look like?
Sure.
And that moment is, and maybe like the actual moment, it doesn't like sit well. And it's like supposed to be like, that's really
it's
weird.
Jarring. I wish there were more of her, I guess. I think later on there's a moment where she's like, oh, you look nice. I'm just like, oh, thank you. And they just like, I wish they built a little bit more with her. So, and I think in that sense, it's unearned, where it's like, we actually needed, we needed to close the circuit a little bit. And there's just like an open circuit there.
Sure.
Yeah. That's my unearned moment. I'm not going to mention the bend and snap again.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably give it to that too, but yeah, I've talked that to death. And there's reasons for it. It's like, it's not unearned really in the end.
It's
just that the lesbian moment is a little bit unearned for me.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I think there's plenty unearned in the... I don't know. What to choose? Maybe they really jump the shark. And I say that because the song is Blood in the Water. Oh, it's so stupid.
God.
It's like it's the professor's first class that she's in.
Yeah.
And he opens the class being like, you've heard that lawyers are sharks, but forget that. That's simplistic. Not all of us are sharks. The rest are chum in the water. And I'm like, and then they're
you
like,
are sharks?
Yes. And then they're saying, like, then there's a whole song called Blood in the Water where he's like, don't be the chum, essentially. Like, you need to get the taste for blood, is what he says.
Yeah.
First of all, setting up to be a villain immediately.
Yeah.
Which
Oof.
I dislike because, like, the thing they do in the movie is they set the one, just like you said, they set up the one teacher to be a villain, which is very interesting because it's these two women characters that you feel are button heads. They do that all over the place in that movie.
Yeah.
Brilliantly. And so like there's that dynamic.
Right.
But like we're seeing right away that like he's gonna
get what he wants. Yeah.
Which
in the movie it's a turn.
Which makes that moment later where he hits on her. I'm like, yeah, he's been a dickbag this whole time.
Right.
He's been horrible. He had that whole song, first of all, setting it up that it's like, it's not about sharks, but we're sharks. I'm like, why? I don't get it. So that is I'm going to go with that one.
All right. Nice. I have one more superlative I want to give, and it's best bit part in the movie. I think my favorite is the old lady when she's like in the salon early on in the film, and she's finds out that they're just like, what do we do to make us feel good after she gets broken up with, and they go to get their mani-pedis, and she's like sitting there and opens a magazine, and Warner's Brothers in there with his fiance, and she's like, oh my God, that's what Warner's looking for, someone like this person. And the old lady just next to her leans in and says, what, deformed? And it's so funny. Oh my God.
Practically deformed?
What, practically deformed?
Oh my God,
I was like,
oh
geez. I thought that was good. That's mine. I think that's my
cool
bit part.
If I have one for the musical, I think I would give it to, so in the movie, she goes to like a counselor at the beginning to be like, how do I get into Harvard?
Yeah.
But in the musical, it's just like one of the sorority girls that's just like clearly a brainier, like a little steadier. Like she's just like clearly a smart part of the sorority group, which
Yeah.
I think is interesting.
There's a character in the movie that I never noticed before, but that person is in the movie.
Oh,
and
interesting.
she comes in, she's like knocks on Elle's door right after Elle gets broken up with. She's like,
yes.
"Oh, I can't figure out the lip gloss thing." And it's like she maybe had like a bigger role before, like maybe something's left on the cutting room floor, but then later on, she's the one that's helping her study for the LSATs while Elle's looking out and the Greek week's going on, and she's like, "You got to study."
Yeah, but that's
it's
a
her.
character. And she's like very involved in the musical, where she's like, you gotta kind of focus. You gotta. This is what you. Let's do this. Which is like, I think it's. I mean, I also like that actress who plays her. She was in some web series later that I watched all the time.
Yeah.
They kind of like spoof Legally Blonde in the I think Submissions Only. I don't know.
Yeah,
if you've ever
Submissions
seen that.
Only. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think she's very funny, and she ends up playing the chutney character at the end. That same actress.
Oh, okay.
And she's great. They do it weird in the musical where they like
Double
bring them
casts.
to the crime scene and then dump water on her head
Oh God,
to show that like the perm would go away.
Yeah.
And like you could just like dump water on her there. Like if you wanted to do like a bit, like, but they have this whole thing where they're like, we're going to the crime scene.
Because that's how courts
weird. Don't do that.
Gotta take the judge there.
Yeah,
that's weird.
That's a little. That one was like, I'm like, okay, guys, don't use. Now you've overstepped.
Yeah.
The use of the medium.
Oh. All right.
But yes, that's my favorite bit part.
Wonderful. I think we've done it. Anything else?
By George,
I think we've done it. By George. We've got it. Anything else you want to add?
No.
Yeah, I think I'm good too. Thank you so much for tuning in to Then a Moment. Yeah. We are getting our social medias and everything set up so you can find us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter at Then a Moment Pod. It's the same everywhere. Then a Moment Pod. And if you have any notes or questions, I might regret this, you can email us at thenamomentpod@gmail.com. And we'll have a website soon too. You can follow us, and we'll be on the YouTubes too, hopefully, coming up soon.
Yes,
so we'll be all over the place
too.
And subscribe, and rate us if you like us, and even if you don't, but only 5s, 5-star. Make it a 5-star.
If you don't like us, 5 means bad. That's
right. Yeah. All right. I am Pavi Proczko, and
I'm Colin Funk.
Yes, and remember, if you're really trying to get someone's attention, just bend and snap.
Mm-hmm. And you don't want to be blood in the water.
That's right. Don't be chum. All right.
Chum.
Thanks. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Then a Moment, a Pavitas production project, hosted by Colin Funk and Pavi Proczko. This podcast is produced by Chicago Podcast Studio. Our opening cartoon was created by Gloriu, and our theme song was composed by me, Pavi Proczko. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite listening platform. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Then a Moment Pod, all one word, for updates on new episodes and behind-the-scenes content. If you have any feedback, comments, concerns, or kudos, you can email us at thenamomentpod@gmail.com. Please rate and review us wherever you can. It would help us out a bunch. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.